In this quick tip tutorial, I'm going to go through my process of creating realistic water droplets. To start off, I'm going to be working with a 2H pencil, and you could create perfect circles, but I prefer having a bit more irregularity to the shape. That way it kind of creates more of a believable feel. So when I'm drawing this down, I'm not pushing down too hard because I don't want to get too dark too fast. We're going to save that for when we have more of a blueprint of what we want to shade first. So I'm going to first give a little hint to where the highlight is. I'm going to maybe give some outline to the cast shadow, but I'm going to start filling it in, and whatever rendering technique you have will work fine. I prefer working in small circles, and I'm going to shade it out. I'm going to really push the value near the highlight area and not so much on the opposite end. Because water is translucent, it will allow the light to pass through, so it will really fill on the opposite side of the water droplet. And it will even pour into the cast shadow, but we'll talk about that later. For now, focus on filling in this drop and having a dark side and a light side. So from here, I'm switching to a 2B pencil, and I'm just going to be pushing those values to be even darker. So once again, I'm going to be focusing on where the highlight area is, but I'm still going to have that concentration of light on the opposite end of the teardrop. And then in the cast shadow, I'm going to lightly fill it in, but I'm going to have it be slightly darker to where the water drop meets the surface. And if at any time you feel you're going a bit too heavy, I have a kneaded eraser that I will pull out, and you can see how it'll lift some of that value up if you press lightly on the paper. Now I'm also going to carry that into the cast shadow a bit, but like I said earlier, some of that light will pour through the teardrop itself and into the cast shadow. So I want it to be the darkest where the drop meets the surface, but I'm going to kind of let there be this fade around the inside of the cast shadow, and it almost has like a darkened rim on the cast shadow itself. Now to really punch those values, I'm switching to an 8B pencil, and I'm really focusing on darkening those dark values, and I'm pushing it near the highlight area, and right where the drop meets the surface, I'm going to make it even darker to really give that illusion of form of the drop itself. And I really enjoy seeing the paper texture show through the drawing itself. And to do that, you push down lightly on the pencil, but still hard enough to lay down the value. So even with a 8B pencil, you can push down pretty softly and it'll still give you a dark result. And that way you can still have some of that graininess of the paper show through. And also, I'm being very careful and precise with how I'm edging out the shadows here, especially on the occlusion shadow underneath of the teardrop. So I try to have a very sharp point with my pencil when I'm doing this stage and be very careful with how I'm laying it down, because oftentimes this can get very annoying to lift up or erase if you make a mistake. So I tend to go a little slower and I work with a little more concentration. The reason I'm using such a dark lead pencil here is to punch the contrast even further and really have the values shine where they're supposed to be dark and where they're supposed to be lighter. And having such a dark pencil will give you that result. And as much as I love having outlines, I'm doing my best to be careful with not going overboard, because oftentimes I can flatten an image where I feel the point of doing a realistic teardrop is to make it look as rounded out and as much of a form as possible. So you can see how, yeah, there might be a tight edge in the shadows, but where it's lighter, I'm kind of letting it just be more of an undefined edge rather than a very tightly controlled line art edge. And to finish it off, I'm switching to a 2H pencil, which is a very light one, and I'm going to gently rub it around the outside of both drops. This gives more of the illusion of a light value, and it will make the highlights pop by contrast. Because this way, the lightest value on these drops are the highlights, not the highlights and the background. So it's a neat little trick if you ever want to make your highlights look to be a bit brighter. And there we have it. This is one of those really easy tips and tricks that you can use for any type of liquid material. And once you have this technique down, you can kind of recognize how simple it really is, even though it may look to be a bit more complicated. And I believe that when doing isolated studies like this, you should then translate it into your actual drawings. So with that, here's an example of my own. Enjoy!